Good morning, Math 10Cs. We are moving on to a new unit now, which is called Equations of Linear Relations. So this is going to be our second of 3 graphing units. And equations, remember that what an equation is, it's going to have something with an equal sign. So y is equal to 3x plus 4. That's an equation. And then in 10C, the equations that we focus on are linear equations. And remember, in the word linear is line. So the graphs that we're going to be exclusively looking at the 10C level, they are going to be line graphs. Okay. Um, this lesson, you're going to be getting a new formula. This formula is probably the most, there's going to be 3 formulas in this unit, equations of linear relations, and this formula by far will be the most important. The formula is called the slope y-intercept form, and the formula for slope y-intercept is y is equal to mx plus b. And you will be using this form for 10C, 20-1, and 30-1. The reason why this is so important is this equation here, we know from our last unit that m is slope, right? And from our last unit, slope was rise over run. Or we had the formula for slope, and if you have 2 points, the formula for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So when you get an equation in the form of y is equal to mx plus b, that m is your slope. This b value, what this guy is, this is your y-intercept. Okay? So for example, if I gave you this, y is equal to 3x plus 1, this is written in the form of y is equal to mx plus b. And from that equation, 3x plus 1, I could say, well, what's the y-intercept? The y-intercept, remember, is that b value. So the y-intercept for this equation would be this value here. The y-intercept is equal to 1. So this graph, it is going to go through 1. The slope is in front of your x. So the slope is your m value, and my slope is 3. To turn that into a fraction, it's 3 over 1. So this will have a rise of 3 and a run of 1. So from the y-intercept, my next point would be rise 3 and run 1. It would be right here. And if I'm going my graph to the left, I would go down 3, 1, 2, 3, and to the left 1. And that would be the equation of the line, right? This y-intercept is at -3. This y-intercept is at 1. And then the number in front of your x value, so here it would be a 1, that is your slope. So the slope here is 1 over 1, which means a rise of 1 and a run of 1. Okay, so y is equal to mx plus b. Flip your page to page 554. So linear equation, write down that is y is equal to mx plus b. Again, this is your slope, which is equal to your rise over your run. And your b value is equal to your y-intercept. And this will always give you a graph that's a straight line. So it says here, highlight this, the graph of a linear equation is a straight line. Okay, how would you graph this? I just want you to write a few notes on graphing. So for investigation, 1, if I gave you this equation here, y is equal to 2 over 3x minus 1. What you need to do is you need to be able to look at this and tell me what your m value is and what your b value is. And when you are graphing, where you start is the y-intercept. So on this graph here, we know that the y-intercept is the b value. So my b value is -1. my y-intercept is -1. So where you start is always the y-intercept. So put a point at -1. So there's -1. And then what I always tell my students, after you have your y-intercept, step 2 is to follow the slope. So what does follow the slope mean? Well, my slope is 2/3. That means I'm going to, from my y-intercept, I'm going to rise 2 and I'm going to run 3. So from here, rise 2 and run 3. That would be my next point. Rise 2 and run 3. Now, to go in the opposite direction, say to yourself, what's the opposite of rising 2? So the opposite of rising 2 is falling 2. And instead of running to the right 3, we run to the left 3. Fall 2 and run to the left 3. Okay, and then you would connect your dots and you would have your linear equation. Go now to class example number 1, which is at the bottom of page 555. Okay, class example number 1. It says determine the slope and the y-intercept of each linear equation listed below. So I'm going to write down y is equal to mx plus b, and I'm going to make myself a note. M is my slope, which is the rise over run, and b is my y-intercept. So going to class example number 1, the slope of this is the number in front of my variable, which is the variable is x. So my slope is 3. And then if you wanted to know, okay, well, what is that as a fraction? That would be 3 over 1, right? So I would rise 3 and I would run 1. My y-intercept is my b value, which is the constant at the end. So my y-intercept is equal to 2. B is interesting because right now it's not written in the form of mx plus b. So what I would do for b is let's rewrite this. Write your mx first, so -2 over 3x, and then this would be a plus 7. Now it's written in the form of mx plus b. Now I could look at this and I could say, okay, that is my slope. So my slope is equal to -2 over 3. So that would be down 2 to the right 3. And here's my y-intercept. Y-intercept is equal to 7. Remember, if I'm going too fast, you guys, you need to be pausing this video because you could pause, rewind as much as you need. If you were in class, I would say, okay, is this in the form of y is equal to mx plus b? It's very close, except I would say, well, what is wrong with the left-hand side? And what's wrong is we've got to get rid of that 6. So how do you get rid of, what's the opposite? Right now it's 6 times y. What's the opposite of times? It would be divide. So to get rid of that 6, you would divide the left-hand side by 6. What you do to the left-hand side, you do to everything on the right-hand side. Y is equal to 8 over 6. Remember I said you always give your slope in your lowest forms, right? So always reduce it. So 8 divided by 6 is 4/3. So type that in your calculator, hit math 1 fraction. So that would be 4 over 3x plus 1 over 6. Okay, now I'm in the form of y is equal to mx plus b. What was my slope? The slope of this equation was 4/3, a rise of 4 and a run of 3. And what was the y-intercept of this equation? The y-intercept was 1 over 6. Okay? Class example number 2. Consider this linear equation. Is this in the form of y is equal to mx plus b? And the answer is yes, it is. If it's in the form of y is equal to mx plus b, I could look at it and I could get what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. So the slope for A is your m value. It's always in front of your x. So my slope is equal to 2. And I would accept 2 over 1 because with slope, sometimes it's helpful to think about it in rise over run. So that's my slope. My y-intercept is my b value. And my y-intercept is -5. Okay, from here, we're going to graph this. So remember that my steps that I previously listed. So when you're graphing, the first step is to always start with the y-intercept. Start with y-intercept. And y-intercept is equal to -5. So go to your graph and put your ordered pair at -5. So right there. Then step 2 was you follow your slope. Follow your slope. So the slope was 2 over 1. What that means is you rise 2 and you run 1. And I would get there. Rise 2, run 1. Rise 2, run 1. Going in the opposite direction, if I said, well, oh, I could tell that that last point is off. So rise 2, run 1. There we go. If I said we'll go in the opposite direction, what's the opposite of rising 2? The opposite of rising 2 is falling 2. And what's the opposite of going to the right one? Going to the left one. So it'd be falling 2, going to the left one. Once you have some nice ordered pairs on your Cartesian plane, get a ruler, draw a line, and that would be my graph. Okay, D says verify the graph using a graphing calculator. So if I was to do that, I need to punch in 2x minus 5. So go to y is equal to, clear what you have, and type in 2. Here's your x minus 5, and you hit graph. If your window looks a little bit off and it's not a standard 10 by 10 window, hit zoom 6. That resets it to a 10 by 10 window. And looks like it matches. My y-intercept is -5, minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And remember, we could look at a table of values. So second function, table of values. So let's check. When x is 1, is y -3? So when x is 1, yes, there's my y is -3. That coordinate there, when x is 1, y is -3. Okay, let's do class example number 3, which is actually our last class example. So consider the equation y is equal to 2 over 3x minus 6. Ask yourself always, is it in this form, mx plus b? And it is in that form. So what I always do is I always write down what is my slope, and the slope is in front of your variable x. So the slope is 2/3, which means a rise of 2 and a run of 3. And what is your y-intercept? Y-intercept is equal to -6. If I said, okay, graph this for me, do you remember from class example 2, where do you start? Do you start at the slope or the y-intercept? Well, you can't follow the slope unless you have a point. And the point is always the y-intercept. So where I need to start is at my y-intercept. And then from here, I follow my slope. So I rise 2 and I run 3. Rise 2 and I run 3. To go in the opposite direction, the opposite of rising 2 is falling 2. And the opposite of going to the right 3 is going to the left 3. So get a few coordinates on there. Take your ruler. Remember that no coordinate should jump off your line. If you draw a straight line and you have a dot that's like jumped off the line, you made a mistake somewhere. Okay? So that would be my equation. To show you how to type this in, because I don't think I've showed you how to type in fractions. So what we have is we have y is equal to 2 over 3x minus 6. On your calculator, just like in class, I always want you to type fractions in a bracket. So that 2/3 we're going to type in a bracket, and the x goes outside of the bracket. So take your calculators out and let's type this in. Go to y is equal to, clear what you have, type in open bracket, 2 divided by 3, close that bracket, x, and then it was minus 6. And let's graph this and see if we get the same graph. There we go, look at that. So I've got a y-intercept of -6, and what it's going to ask what the x-intercept is. So remember the x-intercept, if this is your x-axis, where does this graph cut my x-axis? And it looks to be at about 9, but let's do B and determine the x-intercept algebraically. So remember, so this is going to be, there's going to be a couple homework questions on here, and this is a good review of the last unit. If I say what's the x-intercept and determine that algebraically, what letter do we let equal to 0? If I ask for what x is equal to, you let the opposite letter, which is y, equal 0. So our equation was y is equal to 2 over 3 x, and I'm actually going to put the x up here, minus 6. Okay, we want what x is, so let's let y equal 0. So 0 is equal to 2x over 3 minus, oopsie, 2x over 3 minus 6. Okay, to solve for x, leave this by itself and get rid of that minus 6. How do you get rid of a -6? Is you add 6 to both sides. And I will have 6 is equal to 2x over 3. Now, what I will always get rid of first is if I have a number in the denominator. So this is saying x is being divided by 3. What is the opposite of dividing a number by 3? And that's multiplying a number by 3. So to get rid of that 3, multiply both sides by 3. 3 over 3 cancels. 6 times 3 is 18 is equal to 2x. Now, we just have to get rid of that 2. X is being multiplied by 2, so the opposite of multiply is divide both sides by 2. And x is equal to 9. So what that means is my y-intercept is equal to 9. And that ordered pair is, remember it's always x comma y, so that ordered pair is 9 comma 0. So if I look over at my graph, it looks like my y-intercept is slightly off because my y-intercept here should be there. My y-intercept is 9. And then let's verify on my calculator. So let's go to second function table. And let's go to x is 9. And look at that. At x is 9, y is 0. Remember your y-intercept, or so your x-intercept, your y value will always be 0. So that is my y-intercept. Okay, here's the homework that I want you to do, and I'll set you up with a couple of them. So circle questions numbers 2, 3, 4, ABC, and number 5. Okay, and I'll probably do one with number 5 with you. So from the homework, number 2 should be nice and simple. State the slope and y-intercept of each linear equation. Remember that y is equal to mx plus b. So C, I want you to rewrite. And for D, I need you to get rid of this 4 because we need to be in this form here. Y is equal to mx plus b. When I say rewrite c, just write this negative 1 over 6x first plus 6, right? And then it'll be in the form of y is equal to mx plus b. Number 3, write the equation of each line. The equation of a line is equal to mx plus b. So just to sort of show you, always write this first, mx plus b. Slope, they want my m value to be 4, so y is equal to 4x. My y-intercept, that's my b value, minus 9. And you'd be done A. So now you could do B, C, and D. Circle number 4, A, B, C. You're graphing. Remember, for graphing, you start with y-intercept. So if I was to do B, the y-intercept is negative 1. Then you follow the slope. So for B, if I said, well, what's the slope? Negative x. What does that mean? Negative x. That negative is a negative 1. Negative 1x minus 1. So my b value, or sorry, my m value, my slope is negative 1. Turn that into a fraction, which is negative 1 over 1, right? So that means down 1 to the right 1, down 1 to the right 1. The opposite would be up 1 to the left 1. Connect those dots and you would have your equation for B done. Okay, you could verify on your calculator. Last question I wanted you to do is number 5. And I just want to check, did I assign everything for number 5 or what did I assign? Yep, number 5. Okay, so for number 5, what does it want us to do? For each line, state the y-intercept. So we know that's the b value. B is equal to 6, therefore the y-intercept is equal to 6. If they had me, I'll put a dot at 6. Okay, determine the x-intercept algebraically. So x-intercept algebraically, let y equal 0. So if you put a 0 in here, and a 0 in here, a 0 in here, and a 0 in here, you solve for x. So subtract 6 from both sides, and I would get negative 6 is equal to 2x. Divide this by 2 and this by 2. X is equal to negative 3. My x-intercept should be negative 3. So let's check. From this point, let's follow my slope. The slope was 2 over 1, which is a rise of 2 and a run of 1. Going in the opposite direction, though, fall 2 to the left 1, fall 2 to the left 1, fall 2 to the left 1, and look at that, negative 3, right? If you guys are going to do this one, so remember it's 0 is equal to, rewrite this as 6x over 7 minus 6. Box this in and get rid of that minus 6 first. Add 6 to both sides. I would get 6 is equal to 6x over 7. Now say to yourself, x is being divided by 7. What's the opposite of dividing by 7? Is multiplying both sides by 7. Okay? Say, if you need to use your calculator, what is 6 times 7? right? That's going to be your left-hand side, or 7 times 6 is 42. So then 42 is equal to 6x. Isolate x by dividing both sides by 6, and you have your x-intercept. And that will conclude the first lesson of the next chapter.